He confronted her husband's secret affair and paid the ultimate price: crime story. In the quiet town of Willow Creek, nestled on the outskirts of a sprawling city, Lisa Johnson's life seemed like a picture-perfect reflection of suburban bliss. The small community was known for its peaceful atmosphere, where everyone knew everyone, and the pace of life was slow, steady, and unhurried. It was a place where people smiled at each other as they passed on the street, where children played outside until the sun dipped below the horizon, and where families gathered for Sunday barbecues. It was the kind of place where nothing ever seemed out of place. Lisa and her husband, Mark, had built their lives in this town, making it their home for over a decade. They were the quintessential couple. He was the charming and well-liked local mechanic, and she was the devoted and caring schoolteacher who had worked at Willow Creek Elementary for years. They had a lovely little house on Maple Street, with a white picket fence and a small garden that Lisa tended to with pride. Mark, always the hands-on type, would often be found tinkering with cars in his garage, his hands stained with oil and grease, a smile on his face as he spoke of the things that brought him joy. Their son, Tommy, was a bright and inquisitive 7-year-old. He had inherited his father's charm and his mother's love for books, always eager to learn something new. He would spend hours curled up on the couch, reading picture books about distant lands and grand adventures. Lisa would sit next to him, brushing her fingers through his dark hair as they read together, her heart swelling with love. Life, for Lisa, was simple and full of small joys. Mornings spent in the kitchen baking pancakes for Tommy, evenings spent watching family movies, and weekends spent in the park, enjoying the warm sunshine. Everything seemed as though it was exactly how it was meant to be. But even in a place like Willow Creek, where everything appeared idyllic, there were cracks beneath the surface, things that were hidden from the world, and for a time, even hidden from Lisa herself. Her life, as perfect as it seemed, was about to be shattered in ways she never anticipated. Lisa's best friend, Anna, had been a part of her life for as long as she could remember. The two women had met in high school and immediately formed a deep bond, one that had only strengthened over the years. Anna was everything Lisa was not: outgoing, bold, and full of life. She had a magnetic personality that drew people in, a sharp wit, and a sense of humor that could make anyone laugh, no matter how dark their day. Anna had always been the one who pushed Lisa out of her comfort zone, encouraging her to take risks and embrace life with a little more spontaneity. Together, the two women made an unstoppable pair, one a steady rock, the other a wild flame. Anna had always been a frequent visitor in the Johnson household. Whether it was for coffee on the porch, a girls' night out, or simply to spend time with Lisa, she was there often. Anna and Mark also got along very well, sharing a camaraderie that seemed as effortless as it was natural. The three of them were a tight-knit group, always spending time together, whether it was over dinner or during casual outings. Lisa had never once questioned Anna's place in their lives. She trusted Anna implicitly, as she did Mark. To Lisa, her best friend was an extension of herself, someone who would never betray her. But like any story of betrayal, the cracks didn't appear all at once. They started as small, barely noticeable fissures in the fabric of Lisa's life, things she didn't think to question until it was too late. The first inkling that something was wrong came on an ordinary Tuesday evening when Lisa received a text message from an unknown number. The message was brief and to the point: a single photo of Mark and Anna sitting together at a local restaurant, their faces close and their eyes locked in what seemed to be a moment of intimate conversation. They were laughing, sharing a private joke, and the look on their faces was unmistakable. There was an undeniable connection between them. The photo was innocent enough on the surface, but the way it was presented, without any explanation, made Lisa's heart race in a way she couldn't understand. At first, she thought it was a prank. Someone must have been playing a cruel joke on her. Mark and Anna had always been close friends, but that didn't mean anything more than camaraderie, right? Surely, there was an explanation for this photo, something she was missing. Maybe Anna had been telling Mark a funny story, or maybe they were simply enjoying each other's company as friends do. But the more she stared at the image, the more doubt began to take root in her mind. It was impossible to ignore the sinking feeling in her stomach, the unease that washed over her as she considered the possibility that her perfect life might be unraveling before her eyes. Lisa decided not to confront Mark right away. She didn't want to make accusations based on a single photograph, and she didn't want to jump to conclusions without more information. But the more she thought about it, the more it consumed her thoughts. Was there something more between Anna and Mark? Was she reading too much into this photo? Or was there a deeper truth she was unwilling to face? Lisa spent the rest of the evening in a fog of anxiety, her mind racing with possibilities. She couldn't shake the image of Mark and Anna from her thoughts, couldn't stop replaying it over and over again in her head. The following day, Lisa called Anna, pretending nothing was wrong, asking her to meet for coffee. Anna agreed, and they arranged to meet at their usual cafe in the center of town. As Lisa sat there, waiting for Anna to arrive, she felt a growing sense of dread. Her hands were trembling as she stirred her coffee, and she could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea how to approach the conversation that lay ahead, no idea how to confront her best friend about the gnawing feeling inside her. When Anna walked into the cafe, she was her usual vibrant self, smiling and chatting as she approached the table. She greeted Lisa warmly, sitting down across from her, oblivious to the storm brewing inside Lisa's mind. Lisa tried to mask her unease, but she could feel the tension building between them, a silent distance that neither of them had acknowledged. Lisa struggled to find the right words, her mind blank as she tried to figure out how to ask the question that was burning inside her. Finally, Lisa blurted out the question she had been avoiding. "Anna, is there something going on between you and Mark?" Her voice was shaky, her eyes searching Anna's face for any sign of guilt. Anna froze for a moment, her smile faltering, and Lisa watched as her best friend's eyes darted to the side, a fleeting look of panic crossing her face. For a moment, it was as if time had stopped. The world around them faded away, and all that was left was the question hanging in the air between them. Anna's response came slowly, her words measured and careful. "Lisa, I think you're overreacting. Mark and I are just friends." But there was something in her voice, something Lisa couldn't quite place, that made her feel as though Anna was hiding something. She was being too careful, too guarded. It was as if Anna was trying to shield herself from the truth, and in that moment, Lisa realized with a sinking feeling that she had not been mistaken. There was more to this story than Anna was letting on. That evening, Lisa confronted Mark. The argument that followed was one she would never forget. The man she had loved, the man she had built a life with, stood before her, denying the obvious. He claimed there was nothing between him and Anna, that it was all a misunderstanding, a moment of weakness. But Lisa could see through the lies. The guilt was written all over his face, and she knew, deep down, that the life they had built together was crumbling. The facade of Lisa's perfect life was starting to disintegrate. What she thought was unbreakable, her marriage, her friendship, her family, was being torn apart, one lie at a time. And she was left standing in the wreckage, unsure of what to do next, consumed by an anger she had never felt before. The days following the confrontation with Anna and Mark felt like an endless blur. Lisa couldn't escape the images that had invaded her mind. The photo of Mark and Anna together, their intimate laughter, the brief but telling moment when Anna faltered in her words. Her life, once full of calm predictability, now felt like it was hanging by a thread, teetering on the edge of something irreparable. She had always prided herself on being a rational person, someone who could handle anything life threw her way. But now, that calmness had been replaced by a maelstrom of emotions she couldn't control: anger, betrayal, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of helplessness. Despite her attempts to carry on as usual, to put on a brave face for Tommy, Lisa found herself trapped in her own thoughts. Her home, once a sanctuary of comfort and safety, now felt suffocating. Every room seemed to whisper the lies that had slowly crept into her life. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the soft thud of Tommy's feet running through the house, the distant chime of the church bell every Sunday, it was all just a reminder of how everything was about to change. Lisa's mind kept returning to that moment in the cafe with Anna. The look on her best friend's face when Lisa had asked her the question that had been tormenting her for days. Anna's reaction had been too measured, too careful. She hadn't been surprised or hurt or apologetic. She had been defensive, distant, and closed off. It was as if she knew this moment would come, as if she had been preparing for it for a long time. But Lisa couldn't understand why. Why would Anna, someone she had trusted completely, betray her in this way? The weight of that question hung over her, suffocating her with its heaviness. Lisa tried to find solace in the mundane things that used to bring her comfort. She baked her favorite lemon pound cake, the smell of it wafting through the house, filling it with warmth. She sat down with Tommy for their usual evening story time, reading aloud with the same enthusiasm as always, even though her heart wasn't in it. She tried to focus on the small, comforting routines that had once defined her days. But it was all in vain. Her thoughts were consumed by Mark and Anna, and she couldn't escape the feeling that something had shifted permanently. In the days that followed, Lisa grew more distant from Mark. He continued to deny any wrongdoing, claiming that he and Anna were just friends, that there was nothing to worry about. But Lisa could no longer believe him. The trust she had placed in him, in their marriage, had been shattered in a way that could never be repaired. Every time he touched her, every time he spoke to her, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something was lurking beneath the surface, just waiting to be exposed. The tension between them was palpable. Conversations became strained, words left unsaid, hanging in the air like a thick fog. Lisa could no longer look at Mark the same way. He had always been her rock, the man she had built her life with, the father of her child. But now he felt like a stranger. She had never doubted him before, never questioned his loyalty or his intentions. But now, everything was in question. The trust that had once been the foundation of their relationship had been obliterated, and Lisa found herself wondering if it had ever been there in the first place. One evening, after Tommy had gone to bed, Lisa couldn't sleep. The house was eerily quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the air conditioning. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts racing. She felt as though she were suffocating in her own skin, trapped in a life that was no longer her own. The rage that had simmered beneath the surface for days began to boil over. She couldn't keep living like this, constantly questioning everything, constantly wondering what was real and what was a lie. She needed answers, and she needed them now. Lisa made a decision that would change everything. She was going to confront Anna again, but this time, she wouldn't let her off the hook. She needed to know the truth, all of it. The truth about what had been going on between her husband and her best friend. The truth about the betrayal that had ripped her world apart. Lisa wasn't going to sit back and pretend everything was fine anymore. She was done playing the role of the trusting wife, the oblivious friend. She was going to find out what had happened, and she was going to make sure that Anna couldn't hide behind any more lies. The next day, Lisa called Anna, asking to meet again. This time, however, she had no intention of being calm or collected. The woman who had once been her confidant, the one person who had stood by her through everything, was no longer someone she recognized. She couldn't fathom how Anna had betrayed her so completely. She had trusted Anna with every part of herself, and Anna had repaid that trust with deception. When they met at the cafe, once more, the atmosphere between them was charged with a different kind of tension. Lisa could barely contain the anger boiling inside her, the hurt that had festered since that first moment of doubt. As Anna sat down, she gave her usual warm smile, but Lisa could see the nervousness flickering behind her eyes. Anna knew what was coming, and Lisa wasn't going to hold back anymore. "I know what's been going on, Anna," Lisa said, her voice low and steady, though the words were heavy with emotion. "I know about you and Mark." Anna's face drained of color, and for a moment, she seemed to lose her composure. But just as quickly, she recovered, putting on a mask of indifference. "Lisa, you're overreacting. There's nothing between Mark and me. We're just friends. You're blowing this out of proportion." Lisa felt a surge of frustration. She had heard these lies before, and she was done with them. "Don't lie to me, Anna," she snapped, her voice rising. I've seen the way you two act around each other, the way you look at each other. I know something is going on, and I won't let you lie to me anymore." Anna shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes darting away from Lisa's. It was a small movement, but it was enough. The guilt was evident, even if Anna was trying to deny it. Lisa pressed on, her heart pounding in her chest. "I want the truth, Anna. I want to know everything." There was a long silence, and Lisa could feel the tension building, thick and suffocating. Finally, Anna spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "Okay, I'll tell you, but you have to promise me you won't tell Mark. This is complicated." Lisa leaned forward, her eyes locked on Anna's. "Tell me everything." Anna took a deep breath and began to speak. "It started a few months ago. Mark and I started spending more time together, just the two of us. We'd meet up for drinks after work or go for walks in the park. It was innocent at first, but then it wasn't. We got closer. We talked about things we hadn't talked about before. And then one night, after a few too many drinks, things escalated. We kissed.
And that was it.
It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. We didn't mean for it to go any further, but it did." Lisa felt a wave of nausea wash over her as Anna's words sank in. She had suspected the truth, but hearing it from Anna's lips was a different kind of pain. She had always believed in the bond she shared with Anna, the unspoken understanding that nothing could ever come between them. But now, she was faced with the brutal reality that her best friend had betrayed her in the worst way possible. She had trusted Anna with her life, and Anna had thrown that trust away. For a long moment, Lisa didn't speak. She simply stared at Anna, her mind reeling from the revelation. She couldn't believe what she was hearing, couldn't believe that this was her reality. The life she had built, her marriage, her friendship, was unraveling before her eyes. And there was nothing she could do to stop it. Anna reached across the table, her hand trembling as she touched Lisa's. "I'm sorry, Lisa. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted this to happen. But it did, and I can't take it back." Lisa recoiled from Anna's touch, a sharp, bitter pain coursing through her. She didn't want Anna's apology. She didn't want anything from her. All she wanted was the truth, and now she had it. But the truth came with a price that would cost Lisa far more than she had ever anticipated. The day after the confrontation, Lisa found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions: rage, confusion, disbelief, but also a sickening sense of clarity. She had confronted Anna, and though the truth had finally been spoken, it had left her reeling. Mark's betrayal, the affair with her best friend, had shattered everything she thought she knew about her life, her marriage, and the world around her. There was no going back now. Everything had changed. For the first time in years, Lisa realized she had no idea what to do next. She felt like a stranger in her own life, trapped in a house that no longer felt like home. Every corner held memories of her and Mark, the way they had been before Anna, before the lies, before the betrayal. Their marriage had once been the foundation of her existence, and now it felt like a hollow shell, built on a lie. The shock had worn off by the next morning, but the grief had only deepened. The waves of emotion she felt were overwhelming. At first, it was a searing pain, then numbness, and finally a haunting sense of emptiness. She could no longer ignore the reality of what had happened. The affair wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a betrayal that had lingered for months, perhaps longer. Mark and Anna had been building a secret world together, a world in which Lisa had no place. She had been the last to know, the last to see the truth. And that realization cut deeper than the affair itself. But even in the midst of the hurt and confusion, there was something else rising inside her, a sharp, insistent need for answers, for control. Lisa wasn't just angry anymore. She was determined. She had to know the full extent of the affair. She had to understand how deep the lies ran, how far Mark and Anna had gone. Her mind couldn't rest, couldn't find peace until she had the whole story. No more half-truths. No more secrecy. She needed the full truth, and she would do whatever it took to get it. But what could she do? What power did she have to uncover the truth now that everything had been shattered? Lisa wasn't a detective, she wasn't a lawyer, and she certainly wasn't someone who normally confronted these kinds of issues head-on. She had always prided herself on being a passive observer of life, content with letting things unfold naturally. But now, life had forced her into a corner, and she had no choice but to take control of her own story. For days, Lisa tried to process what had happened. She thought about everything. The way Mark had changed, the way Anna had begun acting strangely around her, the subtle but undeniable hints that had been there all along. But in the end, all of it led back to one simple, undeniable truth. Mark had betrayed her. Not just with Anna, but with the very idea of their life together. All their years of marriage, their shared memories, the future they had built. None of it had been real. It had all been built on lies. But despite her anger, despite the storm of emotions that swirled inside her, there was one thing that Lisa couldn't ignore. She still loved Mark. Or, at least, she loved the man she thought he was. The man who had promised her forever. The man who had stood by her side when life was hard. That man was still in there somewhere, right? Or had he always been a facade? That was the question that plagued her every waking moment. Was the Mark she had known even real? Or had he always been a lie? The idea of losing Mark completely, of severing all ties with him, felt like too much. Lisa couldn't fathom a life without him. They had built a life together, a family. Tommy needed his father, and she had always imagined growing old with him, sharing everything, joys, hardships, even the small, mundane moments that made up a life. To throw that all away, to walk away from her marriage, seemed impossible. But she knew she couldn't continue living in this painful, fractured state. She couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when nothing was. She had to confront him. She had to ask him to tell her everything, to admit the truth, to stop hiding behind lies. The weight of the betrayal was suffocating, and she knew that if she didn't get the full story, she would never be able to move forward. With a sense of grim determination, Lisa made the decision. She would confront Mark. It wasn't just about hearing the truth. It was about reclaiming her life. It was about taking back control of the narrative, refusing to let the affair define her or her family. She was going to find out what had happened, no matter how much it hurt. But Lisa wasn't naive. She knew this confrontation wouldn't be easy. She had already faced one difficult conversation with Anna, but Mark was a different story. The betrayal she felt was personal. It wasn't just about infidelity. It was about the crumbling of everything she had believed in. Mark wasn't just her husband. He was her partner, her confidant, the father of her child. She had trusted him with everything, and he had shattered that trust. Now, she was about to open the door to the truth, and she had no idea what she would find. The day of the confrontation, Lisa felt a strange mixture of dread and resolve. Her heart pounded in her chest, her palms were clammy, and her mind raced with all the things she wanted to say to him. There were so many questions, so many emotions she needed to release. But at the same time, she felt a deep sense of fear. Fear that this conversation would be the final nail in the coffin of their marriage. Fear that Mark would deny everything, or worse, minimize what he had done. When Mark came home that evening, Lisa was sitting in the living room, waiting for him. She had been pacing back and forth, her thoughts a blur of anger and hurt, but she had gathered herself together. She wasn't going to let her emotions control this conversation. She was going to remain calm, even if it killed her. She needed the truth, and she needed him to admit it. As Mark walked through the door, he seemed oblivious to the storm that was about to hit him. He smiled, his usual warm, comforting smile, but Lisa didn't smile back. She was too consumed with what she had to say. There was no time for pleasantries now. "Mark," she said, her voice firm but shaking slightly. "We need to talk." He looked at her surprised. "About what?" he asked, taking off his jacket and hanging it up by the door. "About Anna," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. But it was enough. The moment she said her name, Mark's expression shifted. Lisa saw it, just a flicker of guilt, but it was there. And that was all she needed to see. "I already told you, Lisa. There's nothing between us," he said, his tone defensive. No, she replied, shaking her head. I don't think you understand. I don't just want your words anymore. I want the truth. I want you to tell me everything. About the affair. About you and her. I want you to admit what you did. Mark's face went pale. For a moment, he seemed to be processing what she had said. His gaze flickered to the floor, then back up to her. Lisa saw the shame in his eyes, but also something else, something darker, more defensive. I didn't mean for it to happen, he began, but Lisa didn't let him finish. Didn't mean for it to happen, she snapped. Didn't mean for it to happen? Mark, you didn't just trip and fall into bed with her. This was a choice. Multiple choices. Every step of the way, you chose to hurt me. You chose her over me.
And you lied about it.
Over and over again. Mark opened his mouth to respond, but Lisa raised her hand, silencing him. She wasn't going to let him minimize this. She wasn't going to let him make excuses. The truth had to come out, and it had to come out now. I want you to tell me exactly what happened, she demanded. Every single detail. Don't hold anything back. I need to know. I deserve to know. The silence that followed was deafening. It was as if the entire world had stopped, holding its breath. Finally, Mark looked at her, his eyes filled with regret, and began to speak. I wasn't happy, Lisa. Not at home. Not with the way things were going between us. And then Anna came into my life. She was always there, you know? She was a friend. But one day, it just happened. Lisa listened in silence, her heart breaking with every word he spoke. This wasn't the man she had loved. This wasn't the man she had trusted. But as the truth unfolded, so did the painful reality of it all. The confrontation with Mark left Lisa feeling drained. Her emotions were raw, her mind clouded by the revelations that had come to light. The truth about the affair, about Anna, about the lies Mark had woven around her, was overwhelming, and the reality of it all was too much to process in a single night. The worst part wasn't just the infidelity itself, it was the realization that she had spent months, maybe even years, blind to the cracks in her marriage, to the subtle signs that something wasn't right. The person she had trusted more than anyone had betrayed her in the most profound way. Lisa had expected anger to consume her, to be the driving force that would push her through this ordeal. But instead, she was struck by a deep sense of numbness. The emotions came in waves. First, she would feel a sharp pang of grief, then a rush of fury, followed by an unsettling calmness. Every time she thought she had processed one part of the betrayal, another layer would reveal itself, more painful and disorienting than the last. But no matter how much it hurt, she couldn't afford to fall apart. She had to function. She had to adapt to this new reality because that was all she had left. Lisa wasn't a woman who usually thrived in chaos. She had always been the stable one, the dependable one. She had always been the one who could fix things, who could make sense of the mess that life sometimes threw at her. And now, the biggest mess of all had been thrown at her feet. In the days following the confrontation, Lisa tried to get back to some semblance of normalcy. She took care of Tommy, her son, as best as she could. She made sure he had his meals, helped him with his homework, and kept up the routines that had been so important in their lives. But inside, everything was different. Nothing felt familiar anymore. The house, which had once been a sanctuary, felt like a prison. Every time she passed Mark's empty chair at the dinner table, she was reminded of the void he had left. Every room in the house seemed to whisper with memories of the life they had built, a life that now felt like a distant, unreachable dream. The hardest part was facing Mark. He was still living in the house, but they hadn't spoken much since their confrontation. He had apologized, of course, repeatedly. He had begged for her forgiveness, promised he would do whatever it took to make things right. But Lisa wasn't sure if she could ever forgive him. The trust they had once shared had been shattered beyond repair. She didn't know how to look at him anymore, let alone trust him. But she couldn't avoid him forever. They had a child together. They shared a home, finances, and responsibilities. There was no escaping the fact that they still had to coexist in the same space, even if it felt impossible. The weight of this reality hit Lisa with a brutal force, and she knew she couldn't go on like this. She had to make a choice. The choice wasn't easy. Lisa didn't know what she wanted from Mark anymore. Part of her still wanted to believe that things could be fixed, that they could rebuild their marriage. But another part of her felt like it would be a betrayal of herself to even try. She had always prided herself on being a woman of integrity, a woman who lived by her principles. And those principles had been violated in the most intimate way imaginable. Could she ever trust him again? Could she ever look past the hurt, the betrayal, and the shattered dreams? There were days when Lisa felt like she had made a decision to leave Mark, to move on, to sever the ties that bound them. But then there were days when she found herself waiting for him to come to her, to prove to her that he was truly sorry, that he was willing to do the work to earn her trust back. But the problem was, Mark wasn't the same man he had been before. The man who had betrayed her wasn't someone she could simply forget about. He was a different version of himself now, one that Lisa wasn't sure she could accept. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lisa sat on the back porch, staring at the horizon. The air was cool, the breeze gently rustling the trees in their yard. Tommy was inside, watching TV, and Mark was at work. For the first time in days, Lisa allowed herself a moment of peace. She had been so consumed by the emotional chaos of the past few days that she hadn't had time to reflect on what had happened, on what she truly wanted. It was during that quiet moment of reflection that she realized something. She couldn't keep living like this. She couldn't keep going through the motions, pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. She needed to decide, once and for all, what to do about Mark. She couldn't keep living in limbo, stuck between anger and confusion, between wanting to heal and wanting to hurt him back. The next morning, Lisa woke up with a newfound sense of clarity. She was no longer going to let her emotions dictate her actions. She had to make a decision, and it had to be based on what was best for her, not what was easiest or most comfortable. She couldn't let fear control her any longer. She had spent too many years letting others dictate the terms of her life. It was time to take control of her own future. She spent the day thinking, reflecting, and weighing her options. There were no easy answers. Mark had hurt her in a way that she wasn't sure she could ever heal from. But the idea of giving up on their marriage entirely seemed equally painful. She wasn't sure if she could ever trust him again, but the thought of tearing their family apart made her stomach churn. Could she live with the guilt of ending their family, of raising Tommy in a broken home? Lisa knew that the next step was to confront Mark once more. But this time, it wasn't just about asking for the truth or hearing apologies. It was about deciding what she needed from him. It was about finding a way to move forward, whether that meant rebuilding their marriage or parting ways. She had to make it clear to him that she was no longer going to wait around for him to fix things. She had to take charge of her own healing process. When Mark returned home that evening, Lisa sat him down. This time, there was no anger in her voice. There was no pleading. She had already done that. What she had now was a quiet resolve, a determination to get the answers she needed in order to make a decision. "Mark," she said, her voice steady, "I don't know what's going to happen next, but I need you to understand something. I can't keep living in this in-between space. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not. I need to know if you're truly committed to fixing this, to earning back my trust, or if you're just trying to fix things because you don't want to lose your family." Mark sat in silence for a moment, his eyes full of regret. He didn't answer immediately, and Lisa could tell that he was searching for the right words, but they didn't come. There were no magic words that would undo the damage. Lisa had already known that. What she needed now wasn't an apology, it was an action. She needed to see if Mark was truly willing to fight for their marriage, or if he was just looking for a way to escape the consequences of his actions. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Mark," Lisa continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm willing to try. But only if you're willing to fight for us, too. I can't do this alone. I can't keep living in a relationship where I'm the only one putting in the effort. If you want to rebuild what we had, you need to prove it. Not with words, but with actions." It was a painful decision to make, but it was the right one. Lisa didn't know if Mark was capable of changing, of earning back her trust, but she knew that she couldn't move forward without seeing that effort. She couldn't allow herself to be passive any longer. She had to be an active participant in her own healing, in her own future. The days that followed were filled with difficult conversations and emotional moments. Lisa and Mark tried to communicate, but it was slow and painful. Lisa found herself questioning everything, every decision, every action, every word that had been spoken. But through it all, she began to find strength in her own decisions. She wasn't going to allow Mark's actions to define her. She was going to adapt to this new reality, to whatever came next on her own terms. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't fast, but little by little, Lisa started to feel like she was regaining control over her life. She wasn't waiting for Mark to fix things anymore. She was fixing herself, and that in itself was the first step toward healing. Lisa's decision to confront Mark had been a turning point, but it was only the beginning of a long, drawn-out process. The confrontation itself had been charged with emotion, raw and unfiltered. It had left both of them broken in ways that were not immediately visible. For Lisa, the confrontation had exposed the depth of the betrayal and brought her face to face with the cold, hard truth. Mark's affair wasn't just a one-time mistake. It was a symptom of a much larger issue. He had been hiding something from her, and she had been blind to it. For months, she had been walking through life, unaware of the cracks in their relationship, unaware of how fragile their marriage really was. As the days passed, Lisa began to ask herself if what she truly wanted was a resolution, if it was even possible. Could she rebuild her marriage? Could she forgive him? Or would it be better to walk away, to sever all ties and start over? There was no clear answer. The confusion and uncertainty were suffocating, but something in her was desperate for closure, something that would allow her to move forward, whether it was together with Mark or apart. But the most difficult question Lisa faced wasn't about the marriage itself. It was about herself. What did she want? She had spent so much time living for others, for Tommy, for Mark, for the image of the perfect family. Had she forgotten who she was? Had she forgotten what she needed, aside from the roles she had played in the lives of the people around her? For the first time in a long time, Lisa allowed herself the space to think about her own desires, her own needs. It wasn't selfish, it was survival. She couldn't continue to live in the shadow of someone else's mistakes, to let Mark's betrayal define her. She needed to regain control, to reclaim the life that had been hers long before the affair had ever come into the picture. It wasn't an easy task. Lisa had spent years building a life with Mark, with the idea of what their life could be. It was a life that had been built on trust, on shared goals, on the belief that they were partners in everything. To walk away from that was daunting. But at the same time, to stay would require a different kind of strength. It would mean forgiving, and more than that, it would mean trusting again, a trust that, for Lisa, had been shattered beyond recognition. As the weeks passed, Lisa and Mark tried to communicate, to work through their issues. Lisa didn't know if this was the right choice, but she was willing to give it a try. It wasn't that she wanted to fix everything, to pretend like nothing had happened. That wasn't possible. But what Lisa realized, after days of talking and processing, was that what she needed most wasn't just a happy ending or an idealized reconciliation. What she needed was peace. Peace within herself. Peace in her decisions. Peace in the future she was trying to build, whether that was with or without Mark. Mark, for his part, was doing everything he could to prove his commitment. He was trying, but Lisa wasn't sure if it was enough. Could she truly believe in his remorse, in his promises to change? Or was this just a desperate attempt to salvage his own guilt, his own sense of righteousness? He had apologized countless times, begged for her forgiveness, and promised to be different. But Lisa wasn't interested in apologies anymore.
She was interested in actions, in change,
in proof that he was willing to put in the work, to earn back her trust in ways that went beyond words. They began counseling, reluctantly at first, but it was a step in the right direction. Lisa wasn't sure if therapy would work, but she knew they had to try. It was clear that the affair was only a symptom of much deeper issues in their relationship, issues that had been building for years, long before Mark's betrayal had come to light. Therapy, she hoped, might give them the tools they needed to communicate more effectively, to rebuild the emotional connection that had been lost. Committed. Show me that you're not going to do this again. Show me that you respect me, that you understand what you've done. I can't keep waiting for things to change on their own. I need to see the change in you. I need to see it in your actions, not just in what you say. Mark fell silent, the weight of her words settling in the room like a heavy cloud. He nodded slowly, realizing that she was right. Lisa wasn't interested in words anymore. She had heard enough of those. It was time for him to prove, through every gesture, through every effort, that he truly understood the depth of what he had done and that he was committed to making it right. That night, Mark made a choice. He decided to take action, not because Lisa had demanded it, but because he knew, deep down, that this was the only way forward. He was tired of talking. He was tired of pretending that things could be fixed by simply saying the right things. He needed to show Lisa that he was worthy of her trust. He needed to earn back her respect, piece by piece, day by day. In the weeks that followed, Mark's actions began to speak louder than his words ever could. He started making changes, small ones at first, but they were changes that mattered. He became more present, more engaged, more aware of Lisa's needs. He took responsibility for his actions, not just in therapy, but in their everyday lives. And while Lisa wasn't ready to fully forgive him, she couldn't deny that she was beginning to see a shift. But even as the situation seemed to improve, there was still an underlying question that nagged at Lisa. Was this what she truly wanted? Was she willing to rebuild the marriage from the ashes of what it had been? Or was it too late? She had come so far. She had taken control of her life, made decisions that were right for her, and regained a sense of autonomy that she hadn't had in years. But was it enough to put the pieces of their marriage back together? Could she truly heal from the wounds Mark had inflicted, or had they gone too deep? Lisa had gotten what she wanted, a chance at redemption. She had given Mark the opportunity to prove himself, and he had stepped up. But that wasn't enough. What she truly needed, what she had to have, was time. Time to see if the changes were real. Time to see if Mark could truly become the man she needed him to be. And, ultimately, time to decide if she could forgive him and herself for the damage that had been done. In the end, Lisa realized that the answer wasn't as simple as yes or no. The road ahead would be difficult, and the decision would take time. But she was no longer paralyzed by fear or doubt. She was finally moving forward, in a way that felt true to herself. As Lisa began to walk the difficult path of reconciliation, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Despite Mark's efforts to prove his commitment, despite the therapy sessions and the daily attempts to make amends, Lisa found herself constantly haunted by the question, was this enough? Could she truly rebuild the marriage, or was she merely prolonging the inevitable? The weight of the decision was growing heavier by the day. Each time she looked at Mark, she saw the man she had once loved, the man she thought she knew, but she also saw the stranger who had betrayed her in the worst possible way. She found herself questioning everything about their life together. The house they shared, the memories they built, the family they had created. It all felt like a lie, like a house of cards waiting to collapse. But perhaps the hardest part of it all was the realization that Lisa wasn't just grieving the affair itself. She was grieving the loss of the person she had been before it all happened. She had built her identity around the idea of being a good wife, a good mother, a good daughter. Her whole sense of self had been intertwined with her role in the family, her role in Mark's life. And now, everything felt like it was unraveling. At first, Lisa thought she could push through the pain, that she could put on a brave face for the sake of their son, Tommy. But as time went on, she began to realize that her pain wasn't something that could be hidden or ignored. It wasn't something that could be fixed with a few heartfelt apologies or a couple of therapy sessions. The scars of betrayal ran deep, deeper than she ever imagined. One evening, after a particularly tense therapy session, Lisa found herself alone in the living room, her mind racing. Mark had left for work, and Tommy was at a friend's house. For the first time in weeks, Lisa had a moment of silence, a rare and precious space to think, to breathe. But instead of feeling relief, she was overwhelmed by a deep sense of loneliness. The kind of loneliness that comes not from being physically alone but from the absence of trust, from the distance that had crept into every corner of their home. It felt as if she were a stranger in her own life, trapped in a narrative she didn't know how to rewrite. Lisa's phone buzzed on the coffee table, breaking her train of thought. It was a message from Anna, the woman with whom Mark had been having the affair, the woman who had once been her best friend. Lisa stared at the screen for a long moment before tapping the message open. "Lisa, we need to talk," the message read. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had spent months avoiding any contact with Anna, avoiding the painful memories of their friendship. She wasn't sure why Anna was reaching out now, but the sudden intrusion into her already chaotic world felt like a cruel reminder of everything she had lost. For a moment, Lisa considered ignoring the message, blocking her number, and moving on. She had done everything she could to sever ties with Anna. But then, a wave of curiosity washed over her, followed by an intense feeling of anger. Anger at Anna, at Mark, at the entire situation. Why should she run from the truth? Why should she continue to pretend that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't? With trembling hands, Lisa typed a response. "What do you want?" she wrote. Anna's reply came almost immediately. "I never meant to hurt you, Lisa. But I can't live with this guilt anymore. I need you to hear me out. Please." Lisa read the message over and over again, her emotions swinging wildly between fury and disbelief. How could Anna, of all people, think she could come to her now, after everything? After the years of friendship? After the lies? After the betrayal? The betrayal was not just a one-time act. It was a choice, a conscious decision, made by two people who had both been important to her. Still, despite the overwhelming emotions swirling inside her, Lisa found herself agreeing to meet with Anna. She didn't know why. Maybe it was because she was tired of running, tired of hiding from the truth. Or maybe, in some twisted way, she wanted to confront Anna, to make her understand the depth of the pain she had caused. The next day, Lisa sat across from Anna in a small cafe, the quiet hum of other patrons filling the background. Anna's eyes were red, as if she had been crying, and Lisa couldn't help but wonder if it was genuine grief or just another act. The woman who had once been her closest confidant now seemed like a stranger, her face unfamiliar, her demeanor guarded. "Lisa, I don't expect you to forgive me," Anna began, her voice soft but steady. "I don't expect you to even want to hear from me, but I owe you the truth, the whole truth." Lisa stared at her, a cold knot forming in her stomach. The truth? After everything? Could anything Anna said change what had already been done? "I never meant to fall in love with Mark," Anna continued, her hands shaking slightly. "It wasn't supposed to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. But I did. And I'm so sorry. I can't live with the guilt anymore. I've been carrying it around for months, and I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. But I have to tell you the truth about how this all happened." Lisa listened in silence, her hands clasped tightly together on the table. Anna's words hit her like a wave, pushing her further into the depths of despair. It wasn't just the affair itself. It was the realization that Mark had been so willing to share his life, his intimacy, with someone else. Someone who had once been a friend, someone she trusted. As Anna spoke, Lisa felt as if she were losing control. Her mind raced, her heart pounded. Each new detail that Anna revealed about the affair chipped away at the fragile sense of security Lisa had been trying to rebuild. She had spent so long convincing herself that they could move forward, that Mark could change, that things could get better. But sitting there, hearing Anna's side of the story, it felt as though everything she had worked for was slipping through her fingers. The worst part, Lisa realized, was that she couldn't even blame Anna entirely. Yes, Anna had been wrong. But Mark had been the one to betray her trust first. Mark had been the one who had made the choice to lie, to deceive, to act on his desires. Anna had been a willing participant, but it was Mark who had initiated everything. Anna finished speaking, her eyes pleading for some kind of understanding, some kind of forgiveness. But Lisa couldn't offer that. She couldn't offer anything. Not yet. "I don't know what you expect me to do with this information," Lisa said, her voice steady but distant. You've destroyed my life, Anna. Both of you have. I don't know if I can ever forgive either of you for what you've done." Anna looked down, her face etched with regret. "I never wanted to destroy your life, Lisa. I was wrong. But I'm telling you the truth now, because I can't keep hiding from it." Lisa stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I don't want to hear any more of your lies," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I don't know why you thought you could come here and make everything better, but you can't. You've already done enough damage." With that, Lisa turned and walked out of the cafe, her heart heavy with a pain she couldn't even begin to explain. She had asked for the truth, and now she had it. But it wasn't a gift. It was a burden that would weigh her down for the rest of her life. As Lisa walked through the streets of Willow Creek, the world around her seemed to fade into a blur. She had wanted answers, and now she had them. But what did it change? What could it change? Mark's affair was no longer a secret. It was an open wound, one that had festered for months and was now spilling out in the most painful of ways. And Lisa had no idea how to heal from it. That night, when Mark came home, the air between them was thick with tension. The space between them seemed wider than ever before. Mark had no idea what had transpired during Lisa's meeting with Anna, and Lisa wasn't sure if she even wanted him to know. What difference would it make? Would knowing the truth change anything? But when Mark reached out to her, trying to hold her, to comfort her, Lisa recoiled. The betrayal was too raw, too fresh, too overwhelming. For the first time in weeks, she truly felt the full weight of the damage that had been done. And it was something that neither Mark nor Anna could ever undo. Lisa had gotten what she wanted: answers, closure, the truth. But in the end, she realized that some truths come at a price that cannot be paid back. The cost of knowing the full extent of her husband's betrayal was a price she hadn't anticipated, and it was one that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The night was still, the world outside her window now quiet, as if it had been holding its breath. Lisa lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on her chest. She had finally faced the truth, the full, unrelenting truth about Mark's affair, about Anna's role in the betrayal, and about the loss of the life she once knew. But despite all of this, despite the endless questions and the pain that seemed to claw at her insides, Lisa knew one thing: the world would keep turning. The sun would rise again, and she would have to figure out how to face another day. In the days that followed the confrontation with Anna, Lisa withdrew further into herself. She could no longer bring herself to pretend that everything was fine. The facade had crumbled, and with it, the remnants of her old self. She was no longer the woman who believed in second chances, or who thought love could conquer all. She had seen the fragility of those beliefs in the stark light of betrayal. And now, all she could do was sift through the wreckage and try to piece together something new. But something in her had shifted. As painful as the truth had been, it had also been liberating in some way. Lisa had always been afraid of confronting the hard truths, of accepting that things might not be the way she wished them to be. She had lived in a kind of denial, convincing herself that if she tried hard enough, everything would work out. But that was no longer possible. The lies had unraveled, and Lisa was forced to reckon with the reality of what had happened. For the first time in months, Lisa allowed herself to truly feel the anger that had been simmering beneath the surface. Anger not just at Mark and Anna, but at herself. At the choices she had made, the compromises she had allowed, the blind faith she had placed in people who had not deserved it. The rage was hot, and it burned through her, purging some of the bitterness that had taken root in her heart. But as much as Lisa felt the anger, she also felt something else, a growing sense of clarity. It was a quiet understanding that what had happened was not her fault. She had been wronged, and no matter how hard she tried to piece the shattered pieces of her life back together, the cracks would remain. But they didn't define her. Her life, her future, her identity were not dependent on Mark or Anna. She had spent so long defining herself through her relationship with Mark, through her role as a wife, a mother, and a daughter. But now, She was beginning to realize that she could no longer allow her happiness to be tied to someone else's actions. In the weeks that followed, Lisa took the first steps toward rebuilding her life. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the old pain flared up, when memories of Mark's betrayal would hit her like a tidal wave. But Lisa was learning to navigate the storm. She had been lost in the sea of uncertainty for so long, but now she was learning to swim again, to trust herself, to find her own way. She began by focusing on the things she could control. She reconnected with old friends, those who had been there for her when she needed them most. They listened without judgment, offering their support and understanding. For the first time in months, Lisa felt seen. It was a small thing, but it was a step forward. She had been so focused on her marriage, on fixing what was broken, that she had neglected her own needs. She had allowed herself to become lost in the process of trying to make everything work. But now, she was learning to put herself first, to reclaim her independence. Lisa also began to focus on her career. She had put her own aspirations on hold for so long, sacrificing her own dreams for the sake of her family. But now, she realized that her career was something that was entirely her own. She took on new projects, started working more hours, and rediscovered her passion for her work. It was a difficult adjustment at first. There were moments when she felt guilty for not being home more with Tommy, but she knew that she was doing what was best for her. Her job gave her a sense of purpose, a feeling that she was capable of achieving something outside of her role as a wife and mother. Tommy, too, became a central focus of her life once again. She had been so absorbed in her own pain, in the wreckage of her marriage, that she had neglected to fully see her son's needs. But now, Lisa began to see him in a new light. Tommy was growing older, and she wanted to ensure that he had a stable and loving environment in which to thrive. Lisa made more time for him, taking him to soccer practice, attending school events, and spending time together doing things they both enjoyed. She wanted Tommy to feel loved and supported, no matter what was happening with Mark. Her love for him was the one thing that remained unshaken in all of this turmoil. As Lisa began to piece together the fragments of her life, she also began to find peace. She wasn't expecting a miraculous recovery, a sudden return to the happiness she once knew. That kind of healing, she realized, would take time. But she could feel herself slowly moving towards something new. She wasn't the same person she had been before the affair, before the betrayal. She had been changed, reshaped by the experience. But in many ways, she had become stronger, more resilient. The woman who once thought her world had crumbled was now beginning to see that the cracks could be filled, that the pieces of her life could be put back together in a way that was uniquely her own. The hardest part was learning to forgive. Lisa wasn't sure if she would ever be able to forgive Mark completely for what he had done. The betrayal ran too deep, and the pain was too fresh. But forgiveness didn't necessarily mean forgetting or excusing the past. It meant letting go of the anger that had once consumed her, the bitterness that had clouded her judgment. It meant accepting that she could not control the actions of others, but she could control how she responded to them. Forgiveness, Lisa realized, was not a gift she had to give to Mark. It was a gift she had to give herself. In the final months of that year, Lisa found herself standing at a crossroads. She had been through the fire, had weathered the storm, and now she had a choice to make. She could continue on the path of healing, of self-discovery, of building a new life that was hers and hers alone. Or she could return to Mark, to the broken marriage that had once been the center of her world. But as she looked back at everything she had gone through, everything she had learned, Lisa knew that the answer was clear. The truth was, she didn't need Mark to be whole. She didn't need anyone to define her. She was already enough. She was strong, capable, and worthy of love, not because of what she had endured, but because of who she was. And so, as the days grew longer and the world began to feel a little less heavy, Lisa made her decision. She would not return to the life she had once known, not because she was angry or bitter, but because she had come to understand that her future was not bound by the past. She was not the woman who had been betrayed. She was the woman who had survived, who had learned to rise from the ashes. Her journey was just beginning.
Disclaimer: this channel does not support or tolerate any form of discrimination, racism, prejudice, or violation of human rights. The stories presented here are original and created by the author with the aim of promoting reflection, awareness, and dialogue. All content is developed with respect for diversity and the dignity of all people.